So, Yorick changes are aimed in broad strokes at making him a slightly more functional team fighter in exchange for reduction in split pushing power, making him better in early game at some cost of his late game, make him better at being a juggernaut and reducing the need for him to buy Sarel just as often he hits shredding, variety of quality of life changes to make him feel better to play. Okay, so if they want to make him be worse late game and better early game, that's probably gonna make him a little bit less low elo skewed, is what I'm thinking. Singed, in our micro-patch nerf for Singed, he has a pretty small number of levers that are effective at the changes that work well for normal champions that don't work well on him. So we have to change things that we know work. At the same time, we want these changes to feel positive for Singed players long term, and Q damage is basically the main thing he does, aside from running fast, being unkillable. We're restoring it back to where it was pre-nerf and taking some of the power out of other places. Okay, so they basically decided that they didn't like the change they made some time ago, so they're gonna revert that and make some other nerf. Okay. Yone changes are intended to reduce frustration from the crowd control clans, simultaneously wanting to give more incentive for Yone to build crit items. Brand jungle. Okay, so first of all, I just want to speak about this. Like, it's very hard for characters like Yone and Yasuo to build crit on the first item, because there is no good item. The item system doesn't have a good spot for it, okay? That's why majority of Yone players go Bork and then they go Shield Bow, and same goes for Yasuo. There is no good crit item. Now, Yuntal is pretty close, but Yuntal still has its own issues. I personally would really enjoy if somehow RIOT could make it so Yone and Yasuo players rush PD again. But I think we're far from that point. Brand jungle. Jungle is still a very unpopular role in many regions. We want to make sure that as many jungle champs are viable as possible to ensure that players can transition roles cleanly. Our risk, especially jungle flex picks, is also meaningfully reduced in this world, so I guess they mean fearless. Well, jungle will probably stay very unpopular because the role is just very frustrating to play for so many players. I mean, RIOT has dumbed down jungle as much as they could over the years, right? You have infinite mana regen, you have 100 health, you walk to a camp, you can still kill it. Killing the camps is pretty much brainless, it requires no skill anymore. You know, stuff like this. Like, RIOT has dumbed down the role as much as they could, but jungle still has many other issues, like, you know, you're the center of being blamed and you have the pressure of securing objectives. The game is so objective focused, and jungle is the most important role when it comes to objectives. Maybe RIOT should do something about that. Add AD Volibear and AD Shaco, two traditional AD champions that have their builds dominated by AP. Adding light incentives to add this back. Okay. Fountain region, the notes yesterday were a bit ambiguous. These changes are targeted at making repeated recalls and topping yourself off to win lane through attrition wars. We still want to keep the typical behind case of getting chunked hard and having to recall chunk though. Incidentally, we also intend this to nerf symbiotic souls on mid laners a bunch, which is a bit of a playstyle that's picking up and relatively non-interactive. Guys, the reason why it's non-interactive is because you guys overbuffed home guards on death, on recall, you guys overbuffed fountain healing, and you guys gave symbiotic souls a faster recall. Of course, people like, to be honest, okay, League of Legends player base is very slow at adapting things. If players in League were just faster and smarter about the game, they would have fucking started building these boots like ages ago, right? Like, this has been OP for many months now, like 3 months already, like since it got introduced. Anyway, here we go. So let's take a look at what the specific changes are. So brand passive damage cap to non-epic monsters up by 10, passive explosion damage cap to monsters up by 20 and 100, actually 20 to 50. Seems to be kind of small. These numbers seem to be very, very small. This is not going to be a lot for brand. Ivern, Q root duration 1.2 to 1.6 on the first rank of the ability. Now, I don't know if Ivern maxes Q second. I assume he does, right? And I think even with this change, Ivern is probably still maxing Q second, right? You don't really gain anything by maxing W second, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong. Maybe W is... But this is an insane buff. Like, this is one of the biggest buffs, I think, that you can give Ivern. His Q really does play an important role when it comes to ganking and skirmishing and everything. The whole character has already, like, he has such an easy time invading camps. It's a 33% uptime on CC. And CC is already so strong in League of Legends. There's not a lot of mercs or tenacity in the game. this is for sure going to be insanely impactful. Also, you know what this does? This also makes it so you can secure Daisy much easier. The Daisy knockup, right? You Q somebody and then the Daisy gets triple auto attack off for another knockup. So you can kind of chain CC here. I think this buff is way too much. I really dislike when RIOT does this type of buffs because they... Like, the reason why I hate it is because it just feels like League is moving into Valorant direction, which is just like that CC becomes so overpowered. In a lot of cases, we're in a 1v3 or a 1v2. You literally can't outplay champions anymore because you just can't move. I hate... This is the same type of buff that Elise has gotten. So if you guys remember back in time, they buffed Elise Cocoon on the first rank as well. This reminds me of literally just the same type of buff. I really flamed them for it. Express my frustrations why I think these buffs are not good, and now they're doing it the same with Ivern. I am really not a big fan. This is very scary. This is an insane buff on a character that does not need buffs. Olaf E cast time 0.25 to 1.75. Based on 0 to 125% bonus attack speed. Includes the W and passive, right? Amazing. I think this is a very nice quality of life buff to Olaf. This is very nice. Like, I feel like if I'm an Olaf player, this is exactly what I want on my character. Shaco. Passive bonus AD ratio up by 5%. Q bonus AD ratio up by 5%. So, this is nice. But, not enough. AP Shaco builds outshine AD Shaco builds by a large margin. And 10% AD ratio increases here are not going to make it any closer. Shen, Q now applies flat damage to turrets. Honestly, I think this is also a pretty nice change for Shen. I actually don't dislike that. I usually dislike when RIOT puts champions that are ready kill towers fast, even faster. Like Jax, they did it with Jax, and they did it with for example, Fiora. But with champions like Shen and Gragas, I actually really like this type of changes. Shen is incentivized to be side laning a lot because he has ultimate, and Shen already suffers from having a pretty bad wave clear as a character. So I actually think this is not a bad change. It might be too much, however, because Q damage from Shen, like especially later on, Shen Q is like kind of perma up, and if you're Qing the tower, this might need to be 50% or something, but it's still a good change. Trundle, E slow up by 4%, cooldown down by 3 seconds early. Okay, pretty big buffs to Trundle's utility. If I'm not mistaken, E is going back to its original value. I believe Trundle E years ago used to be this value, back when Trundle was played a lot. These are obviously pretty big buffs to Trundle jungle and Trundle support as well, because this, and Trundle top to be fair, but I would say more for Trundle jungle and support because he uses this ability way more on those roles, and this ability is way more important as well on those roles, right? It's a nice buff to Trundle, definitely. Volibear, empower W damage amp 50% to 50% plus 0.15 bonus AD. Okay. It's nice, but I don't think... I mean, it doesn't do a lot. It's nice, but it doesn't do a lot. This is very little damage. So we have Darius nerfs, 2 armor down and E cooldown up by 2 seconds. So Darius jungle suffers here a bit, Darius top lane suffers here a bit. This is going to be around 0.5% win rate, probably, of Darius. His E is already so long cooldown that I'm not actually sure if these 2 seconds matter a lot on an ability like that. Because he uses it once a skirmish anyway, usually. I really doubt this is... I don't think this is as big on a champion like Darius when the ability is already this long cooldown, but yeah. Gwen Q's a big snip damage, down by 10. W resists, down by 3, but up 2% AP ratio. So I'm so confused here. Are they just reverting all the buffs they did to Gwen? Because wasn't 60 to 160 literally the number before they changed Gwen? And wasn't 7% AP ratio literally the number before they changed the W? I feel like they're just giving it old values here. Okay. Overall, I mean, this is also like 0.5% win rate, maybe a little bit more. Lilia, EAP ratio down by 10%, so they're just reverting partially the buff they gave to Lilia last patch. Lilia got over buff last patch. On top of that, they fixed the bug apparently, where Lilia R didn't work half the time. So that was even more reason why the win rate went up. Yeah, this is fine. Lulu, Q minimum damage down by 10. Q maximum damage down by 15. W cooldown. 18 seconds flat now at all ranks. Okay. So this is going to be between 0.5 to 1% win rate off Lulu. Karma, last patch, lost 10 damage on Q, and she lost 1% win rate roughly. So you can't underestimate these type of changes. However, I do believe that a lot of Lulu players are probably not maxing Q, and they're probably maxing E first. So this nerf is not going to be as impactful as it is on Karma. Naafiri, armor down by 2, HP down by 25, W cooldown up by 2, passive monster mod down by 10%, Q minion mod up by 20%. Okay. Just stat checking Naafiri. Like, they're just nerfing stats on Naafiri. Not much else to say. Whatever. Singed, passive target per target CD up by 2 seconds. Sure, there's going to be cases where this matters, but I feel like usually you're proccing your passive once anyway. And, you know. Q per second AP ratio up by 2.5%. That's a lot of damage on an ability that constantly procs. R stats down by 5. Alright, this seems to be power neutral probably to Singed, roughly. So, okay, here we have the most interesting thing for me in this patch, which is Xerath. I mean, to be honest, like, yeah, Xerath to me is the most interesting thing. Let's see it. Q AP ratio up by 5%. Nice, can't complain. 90% AP ratio on an ability like this, very good. This is a very high AP ratio on ability. However, the base damage of the ability is very bad, so don't get baited by this. W damage, down by 10, up by 5% AP ratio. So you need to have 200 AP for it to be above, right? Okay. E damage, down by 10. R damage, down by 10. But also up by 5% AP ratio. So, a slight early game nerf to Xerath for a better late game. 100% above to mid lane Xerath. No doubt about it. These changes are for sure 100% above. I don't think the laning phase nerfs matter that much. The only thing that I'm kind of sad about here is that I do think that Xerath E as an ability does insanely underwhelming damage. And I'm actually surprised they're nerfing this ability. But the reasoning here is probably that Xerath support uses E a lot more than Xerath mid lane. So all these changes are skewed towards mid lane and trying to nerf Xerath support early game. I like the changes, thumbs up. I'm playing Xerath next patch. Passive crit damage modifier up by 10% like Yasuo. E no longer cleanses crowd control at the end of the effect. So probably a low elo buff to Yone, and probably a high elo nerf to Yone. Yorick, should I even read this? Deaths per grave, 8 to 2 at level 1 to 13. Okay. Q on champions and large epic monsters now spawn a grave. Okay, so it's going to be easier to spawn ghouls. Mistwalker HP reduced by about 50%. Okay, so that's the ghouls. Mistwalkers no longer instantly die to basic attacks and single target target abilities. What? That seems like an insane buff. Mistwalkers take 50% less damage from all monsters. Mistwalkers take 60% less damage from minions and non-epic monsters. Mistwalkers AD is probably got it, I would assume. Attack speed, okay, blah blah blah. QCD down by 1 second, so it's going to feel a lot better to play this. E damage is, I assume, just worse. R attack damage went from total AD to bonus AD, which is a nerf. An armor gold nerf. Okay. So a lot of rebalancing. I do think that this is probably going to make Yorick easier to play. I think this is going to probably make Yorick simultaneously be a little bit worse in low elo. And other than that, he's still kind of boring. Catalyst of the Eons, build path, +1 Ruby Crystal. That's very nice. That's very nice, but also useless. Right? It's almost useless, but it's nice. Okay, cool. Mana cost 75 up. Sorry, mana, 75 up, nice. Eternity mana from damage taken up by 3%. Huge for champions like Ryze and Anivia. Wow. Eternity mana from damage taken also up by 3% for RIOT. Okay, nice. Umbra Glaive, 100 cost down, 80 up by 5. Passive cooldown up by 40. What? Is this even a buff to the item? I mean, it probably is, but like 90 seconds? Like, if you're Pyke, wouldn't you rather have a 50-second cooldown and worse stats than a 90-second cooldown? I feel like this is really strange. It doesn't make any sense why they're doing this. I don't understand this. Fountain Home Guard, max HP per second, 8%. Max mana per second, 10%. Okay, so nerf by 2.4%. Missing health and mana per second, 6 to 12, minute 1 to 14, to 16 always. Okay. Home Guard's Decay move speed, down by 10% early. I mean, sure, it's a nerf, right? It's a nerf, but I don't think it's enough. I feel like Symbiotic Souls are still OP, Recalling is still OP. I don't think this is nearly enough. That action shrunk to no longer include Raptor Camp. Oh my god, they're listening to me. This is literally what I complained about yesterday. This is literally what I said needs to happen. I feel like they're listening to me. That's crazy. That is a big W route. I don't know how they didn't figure that out before. It took me like one game of playing League to figure out why this needs to not be a thing. Oh, that is amazing. So late invades are all of a sudden a lot better again. You can like now late invade and not screw your laner over.